See you Monday.
Hi, everybody. I'm Geraldo Rivera, and tonight for an ailing Chris Cuomo. He's my much younger brother from another mother. He will resume his anchor duties and this chair next Monday. In the meantime, on this Friday night, I'll bring you up to date on everything from battered Gaza to the embattled Eurovision Song Contest, the largest and most watched song competition in the world. It's going on this weekend in Sweden despite thousands of pro-Palestinian protesters rallying against Israel's participation in the contest. That's coming, but up front tonight, the storm over Stormy. What the hell did we just see in Manhattan's criminal court? The world's most famous porn star coming face to face with the former president of the United States, Donald Trump. Everyone agrees that Trump's lawyer, Michael Cohen, paid Stormy $130,000 to keep quiet about his alleged affair, her alleged affair with him. The issue is whether Trump authorized the transaction because he wanted to interfere with the 2016 presidential election. Cohen is expected to testify on Monday. He's the star witness, the prosecution's only real shot at nailing the once and maybe future president. Let's bring in my friend, defense attorney Mark Garagos, and former federal prosecutor Shan Wu. So, Mark, you first. What the hell was that rape of Stormy Daniels all about? I mean, it's about Michael Cohen. Stormy, there's no question that they paid the $130,000. Why did they beat her up so badly?
You know, I don't understand a lot of what this trial is. I mean, I talked to you about it earlier, and I will tell you that, look, I'm no fan of Trump. I'm not a Trump defender, but this trial is really so over the top, is so beyond anything that I've ever seen. It reminds me, Geraldo, of what the Republicans were doing to Bill Clinton back in the 90s when you and I were down in Little Rock. This is exactly what you should not do in a criminal court, which is politicize it. They're taking him off the trail. They've got a judge who should have recused himself under any standard whatsoever. He has chosen not to. He has overruled the objections. He's showed his favoritism. Look, one of the things that I think is fairly outrageous, also on top of everything else, is take a look at the statements that he found to be contemptuous by Donald Trump, saying that 95% of this jury is Democrat. That's a statement that you're going to find somebody in contempt for, who is the leading in the polls for president of the United States. It's really made a mockery of the criminal justice system. And to come full circle to your question, we're not in the courtroom looking at the jurors. I know Susan Nicholas. She's a very, very able trial lawyer. I don't know if she sees one or two of those jurors, because they're not going to get an acquittal in this case. They're going for a hung jury. She may have one or two jurors that she is speaking to, that she is directing this to, and if that's the case, she may have been effective.
Shan Wu, do you agree? Well, Mark was equivocal about it, but what about Stormy Daniels, how she was treated? Before we move on to Michael Cohen, would you have questioned her so severely? Were you in the seat of the defense?
No, absolutely not. I would ask her basically two questions. Do you have any personal knowledge of Trump directing how to put down the accounting details? And do you have any knowledge of whether he paid you in an attempt to influence his election? That's it. Then we'll sat down. The rest of it, I thought the only explanation, given what a great reputation Nicholas has, is that it was just performative for Trump. And really what they ended up doing was emphasizing the very aspects of things they don't want to emphasize, which is all the embarrassing details. I mean, maybe some strategy. Direct had brought it out, and then they didn't object very much and then moved for mistrial. But it's sort of like, why uncross would you want to keep emphasizing the very thing that is bad for your client?
And it seems to me, Shan Wu, that in attacking Stormy Daniels the way they did, I'm going to move on to Michael Cohen, but this fascinates me. They converted her from a mercenary into a damsel in distress, which is quite a feat for an adult film star. They really went way out of line and brought sympathy to a hostile witness. Don't you agree?
Oh, absolutely. It's very odd, that tactic they adopted. And she, you saw, was nervous, as could be expected on direct, but then she did much better on cross because it became sort of like this witty repartee between her and Nicholas. And frankly, she really kind of slam dunked on Nicholas quite a few times. So I totally agree. It would really backfire, in my view.
And Mark, so it's all about Michael Cohen, isn't it? Is there any case, you say that the only hope of the defense is a juror or two. Isn't it Michael Cohen's credibility now against Donald Trump's credibility? And who wins in that battle? What do you think?
Well, look, call me a cynic, but I think this case is over in jury selection. Either they got 1, 2, or maybe 3 people who are looking at this through the prism of why are they doing this case and why now, and basically what is the object of this supposed conspiracy, and who in their right mind believes that it's because he didn't want this known before the election. I mean, if it's that, then, and they've got 1, 2, or 3 jurors who are looking cockeyed at the prosecutors, then they're going to do the same when they look at Michael Cohen. But if you have people who are predisposed to want to see the former president convicted here on that jury, which I guarantee you do, if that's the case, they're going to overlook Michael Cohen's foibles, and they're going to just say, well, the prosecution doesn't pick their witnesses. This is who he surrounds himself with. It's a dirty business. Sleep with dog, wake up with fleas. I've heard that, 100 times out of prosecutors. So I really don't think Michael Cohen is going to be the be-all and end-all in this case. I think that's one of the reasons they saved him for last.
And yet I think it's possible, Mark, before I get to Shanru on this issue, that Trump, because he is so unpopular in Manhattan, of all the geographic locations you could have picked for this trial, they picked the one where people really don't like Donald Trump. I think that jury nullification is possible. I think a conviction is possible just because there is, I know we believe in jury selection, but I think there is an innate distaste. The days when he could fire a pistol on Fifth Avenue and not get in trouble for it, I think, Mark, are over.
Well, I agree with you wholeheartedly. I think the overwhelming odds, I don't even think it's close, argue for a conviction in this case based on this, where he is being tried. I don't think that there's any way that he gets, that's why I said there's no way he gets an acquittal in this jurisdiction. And, mind you, in this jurisdiction where the jury is not sequestered. Remember, the very first or second day of jury selection, one of the jurors came back and she complained that she was afraid that she had been identified and her friends had already put pressure on her. She hadn't even been picked as a juror yet, just being in the jury pool. So you don't sequester these jurors. You have that drumbeat every night across all of the media having him to get convicted. This is the last great kind of straw, if you will, before the election to convict him. Hopefully he gets remanded. I mean, I've heard that, I can't tell you how many times. And I don't see how anybody, unless they're going to just strictly follow the law, follow the jury instructions, are going to be able to vote not guilty in the face of that in this particular jurisdiction.
Shanru, what do you think about the New York effect in this case?
I think it certainly is statistically a good venue for the prosecution. But having tried a lot of cases, I mean, I have a lot of faith in the jury system. So if I was the prosecution, I wouldn't be relying on that sort of data pool that they're mostly Democrats or mostly liberal. There is a hole that the prosecution needs to plug, or at least fill in better, which is having Cohen be able to really tie Trump to the actual fabrication, meaning call these invoices not a reimbursement, and to the bigger point, with doing that with the intent to affect the election. Now, going back to Stormy for a second, I think their dwelling on her actually helped a lot because that's what he wanted to cover up, because it was embarrassing and naturally it could hurt him in the election as well. But I think it's important that they're able to have Cohen buttressed the way they have with all this other corroborating testimony. So he offers a pretty small target on the credibility, and they need to control him. He can't be meandering all over the place.
Well, we'll see where that goes. Shanwu, thank you. Mark Aragos, thanks, buddy. Good seeing you. Now let's look at how this case, particularly Stormy Daniels' salacious testimony, has helped or hurt Trump in the eyes of the public. Here are two very different takes. Journalist and political commentator Scotty Nell Hughes and former Democratic Ohio State Senator and neighbor of mine, Nina Turner. So, Nina, what are you thinking about? Is Trump stronger as a result of this, or has he been in any meaningful way weakened?
I don't think in any meaningful way. I mean, this former president has been embroiled in some type of scandal within the political sphere for almost 8 years now. People know exactly who he is, and they know exactly who they're dealing with. I think what the Democrats, my party, is going to have to do is not so much rely on some silver bullet that's going to take Trump out politically in terms of his base. The mega voters are not just going to wake up and say, aha, that was it. We're not going to vote for him anymore. Democrats are going to have to go out and try to win those votes. Now, there may be some fatigue when this is all said and done, and it is those voters who are somewhat in the middle. But in terms of the Democrats thinking they're just going to find that one thing that just upsets the apple cart and Donald J. Trump is done, is not going to happen. He is the king of reality TV, and this right here, he's in his element right now.
Oh, I know that. I was on the last edition of Celebrity Apprentice. I came in second.
I remember that.
Thank you very much. But Nina, what do you think? Is he winning so far or not?
I mean, so far, yeah, I think he, I don't know, maybe it's kind of neutral right now. We'll see. I don't think he's being hurt. Now, whether or not it's going to catapult him, I'm not sure.
Scotty, do you have a take on whether it's hurting him or not at this stage? I mean, he has really been dragged through the mud in many ways. I mean, maybe he deserved it. I don't know. What are you seeing? What are you hearing about how Trump is faring through this ordeal?
Well, let me tell you something, Geraldo. I'm down here in Nashville, and I do the typical day-to-day life activities, go to the grocery store, go to the ballpark, go to church, go to schools. 99%, I think, of people outside of the media, unless they're even a true crime watcher, are not watching this trial. I mean, let's just call this more for what it is. It's kind of infotainment, but Nina said the correct word, fatigue. That's kind of, I think, the Democrats' goal with this, to distract from the actual current headlines, ones that I think most Americans do care about, and fatigue, to make those Donald Trump supporters kind of weary and just worn out from hearing Trump, Trump, Trump. This is nothing new has been introduced by them. There's no new information that is coming out in these trials. In fact, in 2016, it's the exact same information we heard. And guess what? He got elected. When he didn't get elected is when he was focusing on policy points. So if I were Democrats, I think they're actually shooting themselves in the foot with this. Talk about the silver bullet. Get Trump out there. Get him on his policies. Talk about what he did that made Biden get elected in 2020. That would be better for them, I think, if that is their goal, instead of tying him up in this day after day liturgy of a false sham courtroom that I think time and time again it's showing.
Do you have a take? Give us a brief explanation of why evangelical voters, religiously conservative voters, kind of like his naughtiness, or is that not the way you see it, Scotty?
Okay, well, I don't think they like his naughtiness. Remember, we are we like to forgive, we don't forget. We also like to turn the other cheek. But we also realize that when we look to Donald Trump, we're not electing our next pope or our next priest. We are electing somebody that overall will hopefully go along with our values, and those are not something that Joe Biden can easily identify with. The pro-life crowd, we want to talk about women's issues. Pro-life is still a very strong hold within the Republican Party. They understand that when it comes to pro-life issues, despite Joe Biden being Catholic, Donald Trump is a better chance, as he has shown in his first administration, of protecting life. Also talking about school choice, religious freedom, they feel like they're going to have a better chance of practicing that under Donald Trump than they have under Joe Biden. So that is, I think, why evangelicals are still looking to Donald Trump, because he basically holds closer the principles and the values that he wants to protect than necessarily Joe Biden does.
Nina, what do you see? Are they both Biden and Trump just vessels that, regardless of their personal flaws, whether they're leaking or not, are they going to get the traditional Democratic voters for Biden, for example, Nina?
Well, the good book says, Geraldo, all have sinned and come short of the glory of God in some kind of way. But this, I mean, for me, it is, I want to go back to, the polling that showed us clearly that voters in this country didn't want either guy. I mean, we kind of forget that. So we're kind of stuck here between these two people, unfortunately, but the voters did not want either one of them. The merits of this election cycle is going to be primarily what it is every single election cycle, despite what Donald J. Trump is going through. The man got more lives than a cat. It is going to be about who turns out their voters. So not only will there be Trump fatigue, Geraldo, we're dealing with, and Scotty, we're dealing with this war on Gaza. A lot of Democrats are fatigued about that right now and really holding President Biden accountable. That is the one issue right now where the majority of Democrats, not just progressive Democrats like me, are really on the same side of that. So when it comes to Trump and all that he's going through, we got a president that's going through a lot himself. And I think voters for both are going to be fatigued by the time we get to November. This is turnout, and then turn out again.
Okay, Nina Turner, thank you. Scotty Nell Hughes, thank you. Also coming up, folks, if polls are any indication, Trump and Biden are in a virtual dead heat. Could the trials of Trump tip the scales? And what effect, I'm thinking about this, is Robert F. Kennedy Jr. having a brainworm or not on the frontrunners? Who's he helping? Who's he hurting? NewsNation's political editor, Chris Stirewalt, joins me next. Welcome back, everybody. Geraldo Rivera in for Chris Cuomo, my brother from another mother who is ailing. He'll be back here in this seat on Monday night. We are 6 months away from the election. The latest polls show Biden and Trump in the virtual dead heat. Who and what will tip the scales? Could it be Robert F. Kennedy Jr.? And if so, in which direction will they go? What about Gaza? What about so many different other issues and how they impact our political scene? Joining me now, NewsNation political editor, host of The Hill Sunday, Chris Stirewalt. Good seeing you, Chris.
Good to be with you, my friend.
Yeah.
Happy Friday.
Yeah, we survived our previous gigs, and here we are. So what do you think? First of all, the trial. Did you see any meaningful movement in terms of the relative strength of these candidates based on the salacious testimony and all the rest, Chris?
So there has been, in the data point to a weakening for Trump, a strengthening for Biden, less so, but a weakening for Trump. We've seen some dippage in his polls in the past couple weeks. Why? Is it the trial? Is it that he's not campaigning? Is that voters are tuning in and starting to make some choices? There was a really interesting poll that came out pretty recently that was done for USA Today, and it showed Biden basically the same, and it showed then Trump down. And why was Trump down? He was down with non-white voters, black and Hispanic voters, and he was down with younger voters. And I think this may speak to, and the trial would be part of it, it would sort of be in the water, which is voters who said, I'm sick of Biden, I don't like this guy, I'm tired of the inflation, I'm concerned about crime, I'm concerned about the border, and they said, maybe Trump. And then you look at Trump and you go, this guy, he's the guy who's in the pornographic actress trial, the guy who's doing this stuff. So it's, in that way, that's a long way of saying it certainly can't help.
We had a guest in the previous segment, Nina Turner, who suggests that there's a fatigue. Both these old men, wearing on us, and still 6 long months to go. Do you sense that in your data?
This is an extraordinarily long general election. We are usually spared from a general election this long because at this point, we're only supposed to be really wrapping up the nominations. That's what we know from years, especially years when you have 2 open seats. But even when you just have a challenger, typically you're into the late spring before you're done. In this case, not only do we have an early finish to the primaries, but we have the first repeat presidential election since Adlai Stevenson faced Dwight Eisenhower in 1956. And
I remember it well. You don't.
I do not have that one in my personal experience, but I can tell you that the fatigue in the electorate, right? The fatigue with these voters, we see it over and over and over again in our data and polls from other people. It's not ambiguous. Americans despair of their choices.
All right, let's go over some of these polls as we despair. All right, Trump with the slim lead over Biden in recent polls. Biden 44.4, Trump 44.6. Could not be closer, Chris.
Yeah, and a good way to think about the state of the race is that it's not so much that Trump is winning, it's that Biden is losing. Trump has done an amazing job of recapturing his former coalition. After January 6th, a lot of people thought, well, Trump is done, right? He'll never get all the toothpaste back in the tube. But what you see nationally and what you see in swing states is that the Republican coalition is back. And so he's at 90% or so of support among Republicans. So he's back at his number. Now, he doesn't have much room to grow from there. But when we look at Biden, and you can definitely see it when you go to the swing states, he's underperforming his numbers from 2020 by as much as 6 points. So there's all of these voters out there that are either thinking third party, they're saying they're undecided. They haven't gone to Trump, but they're not home for Biden. And that's exactly how Joe Biden could lose this election.
All right, one of the swing states, Wisconsin, we have in head-to-head. Here, you want to explain it? Chris, walk us through it.
Oh, that's a giant graphic. I like it. I'll put it to you. I'll put it to you this way.
Okay.
Wisconsin is Donald Trump's best bet to punch through the blue wall states of the North. So let's say we'll work under the assumption that the two closest states from the previous cycle that Biden won, Arizona and Georgia, they come back into the fold for Republicans. They revert to their original programming and come back. What's the next best place for Donald Trump to punch through? That's Wisconsin. It's an easier get for Republicans than Michigan. It's an easier get for Republicans than even Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania is pretty close, but Wisconsin, we know about Scott Walker. We know about the history of Wisconsin as a traditionally Republican state once upon a time. There's better chances there. And that's why you see Joe Biden goes to Wisconsin, talk about jobs that he's putting there in the south suburbs of Milwaukee. That's why you see the early Democratic spending there, because they need to build a wall in Wisconsin to prevent Trump breaking through.
Can we go back to that graphic? Here we add in the third-party candidates. So if you had Biden substantially over Trump, it was just head-to-head. But with all of the third-party candidates, it's pretty clear that Trump is the beneficiary of the additional candidates. What say you, Chris Starwell?
I'm not so sure. I think at this point in the race, it's very hard to say what these folks are going to do. Is the Kennedy vote for real? Is it not? And one of the things that I look for is how are the parties treating this third party candidate? Mm-hmm. You can tell a lot about what's going on. So the Democrats were just hell for leather against RFK Jr., just blowing him up as hard as they possibly could. And Republicans were delighting in it. They said, oh, this is great. Oh, have a good time as he's causing trouble for you Democrats. But then we've seen in other states the reverse, where RFK takes more from Trump. And I would say the preponderance of the evidence nationally, this one poll in this one state notwithstanding, the preponderance of the evidence right now suggests that RFK Jr. is a bigger problem for Trump. And it's because of older voters, working class voters, and voters who are looking for maximum disruption. Voters who think Trump is maybe a little bit too much of a sellout, voters who throw their hands up at the political duopoly that they think is ruining life for Americans. If you're one of those voters, Trump may have spoken to you, and RFK Jr. is appealing. If you're one of those voters, you were never Biden's to be had in the first place. So I think we have a ways to go before we see where he's on the ballot, number one, and number two, how those voters move.
Do you have a number for him, I wonder, for RFK Jr.?
Look,
double digits?
His magic number is 15%. If he can get to 15%, he can get on the debate stage. If he can't get to 15%, then it's been a fun run for him, an interesting run for him, but it probably doesn't come to much.
You believe he had a worm in his brain?
I tell you what,
I wish him well. I wish him well. I like him personally.
I have given up on my bingo card for 2024. It's only May, and we've already gotten to candidate discloses brainworm, and I'm out of the running. My parlay's
Chris Starwell, I appreciate it. Thank you very much. Up next, today, the mother of American hostage Hirsch Goldberg left a scathing message for leaders demanding they resume negotiations to bring her son and the remaining Israeli hostages home. We'll play you that message, tell you how far the two sides are from striking a deal. Plus, a 20-year-old Israeli singer competing in the biggest and most watched song competition in the world called Eurovision is being harassed, getting death threats from protesters. Is a talent competition really the place for that kind of harassment? We take it on next.
I'm still broken from this hurricane.
In news I did not want to hear, Israel's war cabinet voted last night to expand its invasion into Rafah, making it clear that any ceasefire for hostage talks between Israel and Hamas are on pause. This has led many family members of the hostages to protest the Israeli government's decision to abandon, apparently, the ceasefire talks, including the American-Israeli mother of Hirsch Goldberg, Poland, who took to Instagram to lash out at negotiators. Watch.
I'll tell you what I'm feeling right now about those people who were in the room this week, who yesterday decided, no, we're all going to go back home. I'm sure they were really frustrated and they were really tired. And I actually think it's really shameful. It is not acceptable. And you should be embarrassed to come out without a deal. You should be embarrassed to have to look me in the eye and look any of the other hostage families in the eye and tell us, we're tired, we're frustrated, we're going home. You know who's tired and frustrated and who wants to go home? Naama and Omer and Sagi and Romy and Keith and Idan and Hirsch. Get back in that room, and you don't come out until you have a solution for this.
Preach, sister. Just hours ago, the State Department released a report saying that Israel may have breached international law with U.S.-made weapons in Gaza. Let's bring in former U.S. Special Envoy for Israeli-Palestinian Relations, Frank Lowenstein. Mr. Ambassador or Envoy Lowenstein, thank you very much for coming on. So, first of all, can you respond to that mom and, her obvious heartbreak over the this grotesque disappointment?
Yeah, it's absolutely heartbreaking. And I don't disagree with her that it's shameful that we haven't reached a ceasefire now that will get those hostages out. I think it's been a top priority of the Biden administration. I think part of what you're seeing with the State Department report and the withholding of weapons delivery was an effort to pressure the Israelis to get serious about the ceasefire talks. Because I think right now it's our judgment that Netanyahu is more interested in placating extremists in his coalition than he is in reaching a deal to get the hostages released. So I think that's part of what's going on right now.
Okay, what about the withholding of the big bombs? Are you for that or against it? Do you think it's helpful? Is it the wrong signal? You tell me, Frank.
Well, listen, I think it's just consistent with U.S. values here. I think the notion that you can kill large numbers of civilians and not have any consequences for that, that's just not something the Biden administration was willing to put up with. We tried everything we possibly could to get the Israelis to change their tactics, to take more care over civilians, and they just refused to do it. And it became clear to us, I think, that what we said didn't matter, that we had to take action to get their attention. And I think that's what you've seen coming out of the Biden administration in the last few days. I mean, we're both for Israel, and yet they seem so, so stubborn, so selfish in a way. I know it's a tough kind of question or comment for you to respond to in 30 seconds, but that's what I'm going to ask you to do, Frank. Yeah, sure. Well, I think if you're inside of Israel right now, you're just seeing a very different world than the one we're seeing from here and from really everywhere else. They're traumatized. They're obviously they have a terrible history with this sort of thing in Israel. And I don't think that as a country now, they have any empathy whatsoever for Palestinian civilians. And listen, that's Israel. That's fine. They can make their own decisions. But we're the United States, and we have our own interests and values. And it's completely reasonable for us to say, hey, listen, this has gone too far. Too many civilians are dead. Over 20,000 women and children have died in Gaza. Like, they're close to famine there. And that's all stuff, as the State Department report suggested, that they could change if they wanted to. I think that's what we're really trying to get the Israelis to do now.
Envoy Frank Lowenstein, thank you, brother. I agree with you. Thank you very much.
Thanks, sir.
Eurovision is the largest and most watched song competition in the world. It's known as the Olympics of pop music. Flashback to 1974 Eurovision, catapulting the Swedish supergroup ABBA into international stardom with their hit song Waterloo. But today, the 20-year-old singer representing Israel in the competition has been facing death threats after more than 10,000 anti-Israel protesters swarmed outside her hotel in Sweden yesterday. Protesters even got inside the arena, booed her during a dress rehearsal simply because she is an Israeli. Listen. Despite facing an onslaught of hate, she advanced to the finals tomorrow, expected to get nearly 200 million viewers worldwide, but even more protests against the singer are expected. Let's bring in the host of the Young Turks, Cenk Uygur. Welcome, mate. So you think it's fair game to harass a singer because she's representing a country that you disagree with, Cenk?
Yeah, of course not. So there is a complicated part of this story, but it's not in what they're doing to her. Nobody should ever target civilians for anything, whether it's harassment, et cetera. I don't like it when we ban the Russian athletes from tournaments, et cetera, because they didn't do anything wrong. The athlete didn't do anything wrong. Look, the governments can do a lot of things wrong. Saying that you can't criticize Israel, which used to be the general thought here in America for a long time, was absurd, right? It's a government, and now it's a zealot, right-wing, awful government. Of course you can criticize them. But when you start harassing civilians, I think that's totally out of bounds. The only complicated part, Geraldo, is, how about boycotts? Well, yeah, that makes more sense. We did force South Africa out of apartheid, and part of that was banning their rugby team in places. So that one gets nuanced and complicated. But when it's an individual, leave her alone.
I didn't like the 1980 Olympics Jimmy Carter boycott. I thought that was out of line and unfair to the athletes competing. Do you think that Israelis, generally speaking, will be kind of haunted or hunted as a result of what's happening in Gaza as they travel worldwide? What do you think, Cenk?
Well, I really hope not, because I don't want this to be about religion, like Jewish people, Muslim people, et cetera. I definitely don't want it to be about, oh, you're from Israel, you're from here, you're from there. And I don't want people attacking one another. That only makes things way worse, right? Instead, we should focus all of our energy on actually targeting the government and to get them to change their course of action, because as your previous guest said, 24,000 dead women and children. Netanyahu's a butcher. So if you want to talk about arresting Netanyahu for war crimes, definitely. If you want to do boycott, divestment, and sanctions against Israel, I think that makes sense. But leave the people alone.
And never forget that it started on October 7th. I hasten to add that, and my wife would be all over me if I did not mention it, just to be, as we used to say, fair and balanced. Cenk Uygur, thank you. Great having you on the show. Thanks very much. Up next, an update on a story Chris Cuomo has been covering since day one. Florida resident Anna Knežević disappeared more than 3 months ago from her apartment in Spain. Her estranged husband, David, I think I butchered the pronunciation of her name, but I got it. Okay, thank you. Her husband, it's always the husband. He was recently arrested in Miami, charged with Anna's kidnapping. Today, he was back in court. More details of the crime he is alleged to have committed were revealed in court. The latest when we come back. Geraldo in for Chris Cuomo, my beloved protege. He'll be back here in his chair on Monday. He has been on this next story since day one. 40-year-old Florida resident Anna Knežević disappeared over 3 months ago from her apartment in Spain. You know the story. Her estranged husband, David, was arrested in Miami last week. Stunning. Charged with Anna's kidnapping. He was back in court today. NewsNation's Brooke Schaefer. Brooke was there. She joins us now from Miami. Brooke, so what was the vibe, and what do you think of how this defendant is responding?
Yeah, so as of right now, bond denied for David Knežević. The judge and the prosecution citing Knežević as a possible flight risk with, more importantly, the means to potentially flee. The prosecution saying that David Knežević has traveled to 30-some countries. He has family in Serbia. So again, the judge denying bond. He will stay in jail for now. The defense can appeal that if they want to.
Okay, so what about the big, the breakthrough here? What was the evidence that led to the arrest that is pointing at him as the clearly the suspect?
Yeah, so we got a lot of evidence earlier this week, Geraldo, in the official complaint from the FBI. But today we learned some brand new information because one of the FBI agents on the case was on the stand today. She was actually questioned by the defense. And during her questioning, we learned through her that she says Spanish National Police found blood inside Anna Knezevich's apartment just days after she went missing. We had known that there was some potential fluid or DNA potentially found in Anna's apartment. Today, we learned that Spanish National Police have blood. That is apparently still being tested. We also learned that all of Anna's electronics were missing, but they said that there was no sign of a struggle in the apartment. Some personal belongings, though, were left behind. The prosecution, though, today saying that they have a very strong concern that Anna Knezevich was killed. At this point, still missing since early February.
So what was this about tension in the court with the families involved, Brooke?
Yeah, there was some tension there because during that moment, rather, I should say, between the FBI agent on the stand and the defense here really trying to lay out the argument that the prosecution only has circumstantial evidence, they say. So they were really trying to hone in with that FBI agent on the stand about this kidnapping charge. Right now, that's all that David Knezevich is charged with. The defense really asking and going after the FBI agent about that charge, saying, what evidence do you have linking David to a potential kidnapping? And they were also the defense was trying to, lay out that Anna had been dating, they said, while she was over in Spain, and her and David were going through a possibly contentious divorce. They also laid out that Anna has had some mental health issues that she has been dealing with for a few years, they said. And then there was this notable moment, Geraldo, with the defense, again, talking about Anna's mental health issues, saying, I want to read it to you exactly, the quote. She said of Anna, maybe she's doing this because she's psychotic. That moment got an audible gasp from some people in the courtroom, as you can imagine. Yeah, and, Anna's brother was there as well. Immediately, pretty much as soon as the defense said that, everybody in the courtroom turned to look at Anna's brother to get his reaction to that quote. And he, shifted in his seat, was visibly upset by that comment, was shaking his head.
Brooke Schaefer, thank you very much. It's always the husband. I mean, not always, but usually always. This break coming up, 4 minutes, 45 seconds. Up next, this Sunday is Mother's Day, and if you're looking for the right words to show your appreciation for Ma, just wait until you hear what the #1 youth motivational influencer, Jordan Toma, has to say. His posts have been liked more than 20 million times. He joins me next.
Right now, your mom can see your potential way before you can see it for yourself. Your mom's not whole without you, and you're not whole without her. So remember that when she's worrying for you. Remember that when she's thinking for you. The most overprotective moms are the toughest moms. They don't tell you that, right? They don't tell you that when you're 14, when you're 15, right? You're just dealing with this overprotective mom. No, you're dealing with the best mom.
Well, that's the way to honor your mom. That's 32-year-old Jordan Toma, the #1 youth motivational speaker whose social media posts have been viewed more than 20 million times. Jordan's success story, really one of triumph over serious learning disabilities. And the one person who never gave up on him was his mom. And now he's inspiring others to appreciate their moms. Jordan Toma, welcome to the program. So what did you do for your mom? What's special? How are you honoring her on Sunday?
On Sunday, well, so this Sunday, so one thing I've learned about my mom, this may be for all the moms over the world. Your mom, my mom, loves a special card. So I always try to find the most special card. I write something really special in there. I actually live on the same street as my mom, so I'll get up early, I'll go deliver the card, but I always try to find the most special card, and I hand deliver it to my mom, and she loves it every single Mother's Day.
Now, do moms like the gestures, like an original card? I sketch one out. I always have. My mom's gone, but for my wife, who's the mother of my children. You know, or did they want like a diamond ring or a silver pendant or what?
I think the moms just want their kids. They just want their kids. Like, you just being there is the greatest gift. So if you could show up at their house and just be there, maybe eat breakfast, or the gifts don't matter. It's just you. You are your parents. You're your mom's gift. And if you could show up and be their gift, I think that's all my mom ever wanted, us just to be there. And that's the best gift you can give your mom.
I'm just a kid with an IEP. An IEP, what's that?
So I'm just a kid with an IEP is the name of my business, but an IEP is an individualized educational plan. So when you're in school and you have certain learning disabilities, you get an IEP. And an IEP is for accommodations. So you can get extra time on your test, note takers, extra support in class, and you get that in school, especially if you have learning disabilities.
And so did you find it helpful for yourself? I mean, did you go on to college?
Yeah, so in school I struggled a lot. And I struggled in school, but I also struggled accepting that I struggled. And I had an IEP, and my mom fought for that, and she fought for the support, but I didn't want to embrace the support. I didn't want anyone to know. I felt embarrassed. I felt like I wasn't good enough and wasn't smart enough, so I really didn't utilize it. The only time I ended up utilizing it was when I got accepted. I got denied from 15 colleges. One school gave me a chance in New Jersey called Centenary University. It was called Centenary College at the time. And I had to complete a summer school program called the Step Ahead program. And that program was for me to get acclimated to the college life, but also to prove to the college that I could make it in college. And that was the first time I've ever used my accommodations in my life. And that's